to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just so everybody knows, we have two school board members that are calling in today. Shannon and Cynthia are online, so they'll be online for that. Dr. Brenner, you have an adjustment to the agenda, I believe.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. You can see at your workspace we have a consent agenda item to add a new teacher who has started with us, but we just need your final approval on that. So that would be under Superintendent's recommendation for action 7C. 7C. Thank you.
Any discussion about the agenda? Doug? Doug moves approval of the amended agenda, seconded by Chris. Any further discussion? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. I was waiting for the delay for the people on the telephone, but I didn't hear any delay, so thank you. Motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you. Celebrating success. This is an exciting presentation. I'm really excited about it, and I think the board and administration is really excited about it. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brenner so he can speak a little about it and introduce our distinguished guests. Thank you, Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. First of all, an announcement, a proclamation. On this day, Monday, October 12th, 2020, Grand Forks Public Schools is proud to acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day. Indigenous Peoples Day honors the past, present, and futures of Native peoples throughout the United States. The holiday recognizes the legacy and impact of colonialism on Native communities, and it also celebrates the cultures, contributions, and resilience of contemporary Native peoples. I'm pleased to introduce Courtney Savanasan, a community member, a parent, an ambassador for our Native peoples, who has a few remarks, and then she'll introduce a second guest who is with us on the phone. Ms. Courtney.
They showed me how to do it. I'm just making sure we got it good. Bujuanin, Anishinaabe, Gijigad, Mindug Maganug, Nimiwawa Te Koe, Nindijnakas. Hello, my friends and relatives. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day. My name is Courtney Davis Suvanasak, and I'm an enrolled citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. I last stood in front of you back in February when we made the request in the addition to the calendar for Indigenous Peoples Day to be recognized on the Grand Forks Public School District calendar. I'm so thankful and grateful for that. And today, this evening, we celebrate the second annual Indigenous Peoples Day, and on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Métis, Ashanti, Sakoan, and Sisseton peoples. In light of a community celebration because of COVID-19 and these, unprecedented times, many communities throughout the United States are celebrating virtually. So I, again, would like to thank you in allowing me to share the space with you and to also have the opportunity to present the North Dakota tribal flags. I worked with Dr. Brenner to get this going, and thank you for all of your work, Cindy. Everyone, thank you for being so supportive of this initiative. I couldn't have done it without you. It's been just a really good experience, and I feel very welcomed here, and I'm going to bring my children up to know that they're valued here within this district, so I want you to know that it means a lot to me. Out of respect for the health and safety of our community, we would have liked to do that community celebration, but like I said tonight, we'll be gifting and dedicating the North Dakota tribal flags on that beautiful podium. Thank you so much to the people who carved those out. I was just completely blown away walking into this room this evening. From left to right, we have the Standing Rock flag, Standing Rock Sioux tribe flag, and I have with me the MHA three affiliated tribal flag. My sister was supposed to be here with us tonight. She unfortunately was busy and had to drive back to Newtown, North Dakota this evening from Bismarck, so she literally drove around the state to drop off the flag today. So thank you to my sister Twyla Baker Demery. She is the president of the Nuheta Hidatsa Sanish College out in Newtown. We created a brochure also, and I can forward that to Dr. Brenner so you can see. It has all of the logos of all of the tribal flags, all of the links to the tribal nations, and a description of each. And so if I continue on, Spirit Lake Nation is in the middle, and then my tribe where I'm enrolled is the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, and then we have the Sisseton Wahpeton flag. Almost done with my remarks. In addition, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize the City of Grand Forks, City Council, UND, the school board, and all of my accomplices and allies who supported the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution, the calendar requests, all the events, and the tribal flags dedications. None of this would have been possible without the strong support from this community and all of my relatives from across North Dakota and Indian country. Joining us this evening, I am so thankful for his mentorship, his friendship. He's joining us by phone. His name is Mr. Scott Davis. He is the Executive Director for the North Dakota Indian Affairs Commission. So, Chimigwich, many thanks to everyone again throughout this table, and I would like to present the MHA 3 affiliated flag to Dr. Lunn, if that's acceptable.
Hello? Hi, Shannon. Oh, did I get dropped? You got dropped. You're back on. Mr. Davis,
Yes, I'm
the
here.
floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Petu Washte, good day. Bonjour. Scott Davis here with the North Dakota Indian Affairs Commission, Executive Director for Governor Burgum. First and foremost, I want to say congratulations. Congratulations to you as a community, as a school district, board members, administration, faculty, staff on an outstanding achievement in achieving and recognizing First Nations Indigenous Peoples Day today. And I've been watching this closely for some time, obviously through Courtney, a great friend of mine, Indian Wade, relative to me. And, I think the other thing that really resonates for me, both from a government leadership perspective, but also personally, is in light of what our country is going through in the terms of, protests, etc. This shows not only the communities in and around Grand Forks, North Dakota, but throughout the United States and perhaps even the world on how a process can be followed with dignity, understanding, respect, unity, honor. And in doing that together, great things like this can happen. And I think that is proven here tonight in witnessing what you all have achieved here in the past number of months and winding up today. So congratulations to you and to your teams for taking the time to embrace it, to understand. I'm sure many of you had to have some time to educate yourself about who we are historically, contemporary, and and who we really are. And from coming from an educational background myself, these are the things that we have been working on for decades, from my father's time to my time, to correcting the history of who we really are as Native American people and nation. So, again, thank you so much. And I just want to add one thing to your leadership as a board and as administration, in that the epitome of leaders like you there at your board meeting. The epitome of great leaders is that you are always a student, and I think I recognize that with you all, and will do anything I can to help you, and I definitely will relate this to the governor and our cabinet here. But this is certainly a big deal to Grand Forks, a big deal to North Dakota, and a big deal for our nation to witness today. So thank you all. Pilamialo, Chimiquech, and I hope you all have a good board meeting. Special blessings and safety to you and your families, your loved ones out there throughout this COVID time, and just blessings and protection for you all. Thank you very much.
Courtney, is it okay if I open it up if somebody has any questions or comments? We usually do that. I would just hope that as COVID goes away, which we know it's going to go away, that you and your group will come back and complete the celebration with what we can't do during COVID time. So I'm sure down the road at some point, I can't tell you when, but we would like to have you back. So I'm wondering if any board members have any questions or comments? Mr. Delfit.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. To the Native American people in the room, when I think about our district and our state, my vision would be that we see a much more diverse population in our schools as teachers, administrators, paraeducators, cooks, custodians. And what we need is to ensure that we provide the proper education so that those individuals are prepared to interview and receive jobs so they can be leaders and demonstrate the greatness that they can bring, and what a diverse population of adults in a school, the difference that they can make working with the students. So I would say we'd be more than willing to roll up our sleeves and continue to do the good work, but just take it a bit further if we're able. And thank you for being here, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? Jackie.
I just want to say thank you for your leadership and your partnership over, well, more than just this year.
Cynthia or Shannon on the phone, do you have any questions or comments? I don't want to leave you two out.
No, I don't, except for my apologies for not being there in person. I think this is a very significant night for the district and a great step forward for Grand Forks. So thank you for all of your work to effectuate this.
Thank you, Shannon. Well, thank you and all of your colleagues that are here tonight, and we look forward to partying in the future over this. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Let's move on to item 4, which is the approval of the minutes of the September 28th minutes. We have a motion by Bill. Do we have a second? We have a second by Doug. Any questions or comments about the September 28th minutes? Hearing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 5, which is citizen comments. Do we have any citizens in the audience that wanted to talk about any non-agenda items? I don't have any of the famous blue cards, and I don't see any people raising their hands. So let's move on to item 6, superintendent's recommendations for discussion. Review of school board norms. Doug.
The purpose of school board norms is to ensure that all individuals have the opportunity to contribute in a meeting to increase productivity and effectiveness and to facilitate the achievement of our goals. Our norms are 1, be prepared, 2, be on time, 3, value and respect each other, 4, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation. 5, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public. 6, speak up when the norms are not being followed. And 7, advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind.
Thank you, Doug. Let's move on to item 6B, which is the Diversity, Equity, Inclusivity Committee update. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Dr. Lunn. The timing couldn't be better with the flag ceremony, Indigenous Peoples Day, and providing our first overall report to you. From a committee perspective, that's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Committee. So you have a memo that starts on page 7, basically outlined the task at hand, and that's that we want to establish and sustain a cultural competence action plan so that all students and adults within our framework, within our system, are competent relative to cultural competency. Our group, the DEI committee, we invited people to be a part of it. Some other people nominated other people. We had board members nominate community people, and we had community people nominate community people as well. So we started with a group of approximately 24, 25 community members. And when we first met, actually all of our meetings were by Zoom based on the environment that we're presently in. We started with committee norms, starting with always do your best, be impeccable with your words, don't make assumptions, and don't take anything personally. But I do want to highlight the second part of number 4. Not only don't take anything personally, but personalize the conversation to act upon it. That came from one of our committee members, and that was a powerful moment for me being a committee member. So attached to this, you have our strategic plan, and we have 3 members, actually we have 4 members of the committee who are here tonight, 3 members who are going to speak and talk about the embedded part of the strategic plan that would be highlighted in yellow that would be new for you to see. I do want to highlight that committee members Katie Dockler, Courtney Savanasak, who is here, and Dr. Tom McQuee Bailey from the University of North Dakota were breakout session facilitators, highlighting 3 themes of equity, inequity, inherent biases, and also anti-ism, or anti-isms, plural. We had some deep conversations. You can see the number of times we met in that paragraph. And at the bottom of this page, you can also see by name who all the committee members were. So at this time, I would invite 3 members of the committee to come up. But before we do that, I do want to say a 4th member is here. Mara Ferguson is here. Thank you for being here, Mara. She was a critical player on the committee as well. But the people who will present tonight will be our Chief Academic Officer, Amy Barch, and Courtney Savanasak will present as well, and Marina Kocic will present as well. Thank you, Marina. I got it right until I just repeated it, then I said it wrong. Not a good move on my part. So, committee members, if you would please come to the microphone.
There we go. Good evening. I'm Amy Barch, as Dr. Brenner said, the Chief Academic Officer, and I'm pinch hitting for Katie Dockler tonight, who was unable to attend. She was our subgroup facilitator on equity and inequity. We started our subgroup and we focused on identifying some of the equities and inequities within our school system. And while this isn't a comprehensive list, some of our highlights were talking about resources from building to building, access to things such as bus tickets, the effect of poverty in our community, and accessing resources such as free and reduced lunch and some of the hurdles that come with navigating those systems. We also talked about equity in resources that students have to reach their full potential. What we did next is we developed several goals or goal ideas, and then we looked at how can we narrow that focus so we can do some actionable items. And so what you'll find on your agenda on page 18 is we identified 2 goals that fit within the strategic plan, emphasizing culture competence within our K-12 system, with strategies of updating our curriculum review process, and then also develop diversity and inclusion initiatives for each grade and building for students to build cultural competence and embrace diversity and enable a culturally safe, respectful environment for students to value and practice inclusion. We also knew that within that we had goal number 3 was to provide district staff, principals, teachers, and professional development to help them assess their own cultural viewpoints and biases and effectively engage diverse families and community members.
Hello again. My name is Courtney, and I was part of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusivity Committee. We spoke specifically in our subgroup about anti-bias, and we had a really good time going through all of these different things. In front of you, we are under Goal 1 of Positive School Climate and Culture. We listed 2 strategies that we can include through measurement of equity and experiences and utilizing survey data to create an action plan. So that was a bulk of a lot of our discussions. And, you know, we collect this data on our students and we collect this data on our staff. So how do we take that data and look at it throughout the year? And a lot of what we had talked about in our subgroup was we need to be able to be really honest with these goals and going forward and having these tough conversations, because we all experience, we all have our own biases. And I think that was one of the first conversations that we really had to dive deep into, was that just getting to it, getting to be comfortable in talking about our own biases, and that we're always going to have work to do. So even with, you know, us on the committee, we were continuously finding how we need to be present and talking to each other in a good way. And we're looking forward to, you know, continuing on this work. If you scroll down to the third goal of strengthening the expectations of students and holding them accountable, I think this one is, you know, kind of where, I think it was kind of the launching point for some of these conversations, because we see these incidences happening to our students and our families throughout the years, and we really want to hold ourselves and each other accountable to making sure that our students feel safe and supported here in the district. So, like I said, we are looking forward to continuing this work, and thank you so much again for the opportunity to be a part of this committee and be a part of your evening tonight. Thank you.
And I'm Marina Kojic, and I was going to just elaborate on, we added the third goal. Courtney kind of touched that. Third goal is on strengthening expectations of students and provide accountability for students to address any harassing, offensive, hateful, and discriminatory speech directed at individuals or groups of individuals based on race, religion, color, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, or disability. And I just want to address, I've been teaching in our school district for many years, and with my accent, you know that I came from different countries, so my experience coming here, and my kids were students in school district, we always felt welcomed and included. And we just, with this, being on this, in this group of people discussing on how we can improve, even make it better, our school district as a better place for, I felt really honored to be part of that group, to make sure that people are in, that kids feel safe and included in our school district. And that's definitely ongoing work. So with some strategies that what we put in our strategic plan, and just keep working on that to make sure that everybody feels that way. So strategies that we put down to accomplish that goal is to train staff, and I think education is a huge part. Education of our teachers and kids, and in that area, and to make sure that the practices to use misconduct as a learning opportunities, emphasize peacemaking and conflict resolution to focus on what needs to happen to repair harm, what can we do better. And then conduct training for campus administrators and additional school leaders on the district non-discrimination and harassment policy and discipline policy to ensure consistent application of consequences for discriminatory behavior. As two previous ladies said, we had some great discussions and great questions asked. So we felt really good adding this to our strategic plan. And then I have we added also 2 more goals in community engagement. So goal number 3, to ensure that all staff, students, families, and community members have a sense of belonging at our schools, and that we provide opportunities inside and outside of the classroom where everyone can learn about each other's diverse backgrounds. And strategies for that is to create annual Strength in Voices conference to highlight topics important to our students and community, to help highlight that students and community members' voices, the community member voice is an important indicator of how our schools are doing and the journey to create more inclusive and equitable learning environments. And then build upon goal number 4, to build upon existing school partnership with diverse community organizations. And strategies to create a diversity calendar for year-round. And we have some events in like our multicultural event that comes, I think, in the spring. It was always great opportunity to learn about each other's cultures and events. So I think that was, that's been part for last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years maybe. So just adding more events to learn about each other's culture would be great. So thank you.
Maybe one other thing I would add is maybe not represented or embedded in our strategic plan is Lindsay Root, our HR director, and I have had some deep conversations about being very intentional about our recruiting process for staff. We want to make sure as we move forward in the future that our staff represent our student population. So we are going to be looking at all corners of the USA, and if that means face-to-face visits, post-pandemic environment, we will do that. We'll try to accomplish that through technology, but we're going to be very, very intentional about reaching places we haven't reached before to bring in people who may not know too much about North Dakota. And let me just add one more thing on a personal note. I stayed overnight in the hospital about a year ago, and I had 4 different nurses, and all of the nurses were from different parts of the country, and all of the nurses were people of color. And the conversation wasn't so much about them being traveling nurses. The conversation was about them wanting to stay here because they liked our community. And they came from some warm places in the United States. So I think we've got a great opportunity to sell our community and bring some folks in. So with that, I would turn it back to you, Dr. Lund.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? Go ahead, Jackie.
I just want to really take a moment to recognize how really big this is and what a representation this is of collaboration and leadership and bringing in resources. I remember being on the strategic planning committee and diversity being one of those things that we really couldn't quite get our hooks into perfectly. And so having this committee that did that work and was able to do that is just huge. I look at things like, looking at disciplinary practices and curriculum, and those are going to have ripple effects through generations in the school district. And I think it's just, I'm very proud of our district today for doing this work.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Shannon or Cynthia, do you have questions or comments? I have one, and there's I think the education is critical, but there's one group that's missing, and that's the board. I didn't see a lot of education for the board. I'm wondering if any of you, if you have some easy reads, like I'm in the middle of reading about the White Fragility book, and I'm learning so much. I'm learning so much from that. I'm wondering if any of you have any either short articles or little books or things like that. If you could pass that on to Dr. Brenner or Cindy, she could just email us and say, hey, here's a couple of good reads, because we're all at different levels when it comes to education about this, and we all have prejudices. Just what do we do with our prejudices, as the White Fragility book talks about. So I think it'd be helpful, at least for me, and I suspect the other board members, if there's easy reads out there or things that I don't want a 503-volume set book, but something that can educate the board as well, because the last thing we want to do everybody in the school districts moves forward and the board doesn't move forward with them. So and I'm not limiting it just to you three out there, Dr. Brenner, Ms. Galach, anybody may have good resources for us, and if they do, if we could just pass it on to Cindy, then we can maybe be further educated on that. Yep.
Cindy, I had a quick question.
Yeah,
I'm Mara Ferguson.
Hang on a second, Shannon, we'll catch you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Mara Ferguson. I'm also on that committee. And I think along with that, Dr. Lynn, it might be helpful to actually have conversations about these things as well.
Yes.
And I can't speak for the whole committee, but I can speak for myself and others I know who would welcome those discussions as well. So, I mean, if you want to reach out to Dr. Brenner, to reach out to the group, or to any of us individually, I think those conversations would be welcome. Because it is important to do the reading, but it's more important to make those connections and do the doing. So I think that would be welcome.
And doing the discussion, I agree with you completely, so thank you. Shannon, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, and I'm going to apologize that it was a little bit hard to hear the presentation just from where the speaker is. So this may have been covered, but and I heard bits and pieces, and I think it is. But one of the big things that I've noticed in at least HR practices and really in organizational practices as a whole when it comes to diversity and attempting to, enhance the cultural diversity within your organization is that if you're not intentional about it, it doesn't happen. So things like, I heard a few bits and pieces, education is very important, training is very important, but, and to Dr. Brenner's point about hiring practices, intentionality of actually examining what are you doing currently and how can you make those processes a little bit different and unique in the sense of even simple things like our communication. How are we getting our job postings out there? Are we all electronic? Because sometimes that can create a gap in applicants who don't regularly access information that way. And just looking outside of your typical job posting, going to specific organizations that emphasize diversity representation of a cohort of individuals, like, trying to think of one. I can think of them in terms of like HBCUs and some of their science-based professional organizations. They have those listservs out there. And I think I heard a little bit of that from Dr. Brenner, but I just want to encourage some of those not so obvious ways to really enhance the opportunity to bring diversity within our staff and faculty rank.
Thank you, Shannon. Good comments. Any further questions or comments from the group?
Yeah, this is Cynthia.
Thank you. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you. One of the things that I really liked in the cover memo was the note that the committee is intending to be engaged in future meetings with regards to curricular studies, writing, and implementation. Because what we don't want this to do is just to be in the strategic plan and not to continue to improve. I think there's still work to be done, and I'm remembering the summer and how challenging that was. And so I'm really pleased that the committee members are willing to come together again. I don't know that there's any set time on that, and that would be my question, if you've thought about how that will operationalize.
Typically, we do our study review and curriculum writing work. We can call it ongoing, but the heavy lift usually ends up in the spring portion of the year. So we'll make sure that this committee is engaged in the process. And they were willing to do more than just that. They were willing to be advocates and voices for any person who feels marginalized in the community. So we are going to find spaces for them to be representative of the community and to communicate with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Any other comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, thank you all for being here, some of you doing double duty and triple duty tonight. We appreciate it. This is important work, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you in the future about it. Thank you. Let's move on to Superintendent's recommendations for discussion. 6C, school reopening update. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. And just a note about the previous committee, Mr. Thompson and Ms. Galach were part of that committee as well, in case you didn't see that in the memo, and I didn't recognize them tonight, so my apologies for that. School reopening update, just a couple of bullet points to visit with you about. I know I've had a conversation with all of you independently regarding the North Dakota Department of Health's pivot as it relates to close contacts that happen within the school day. And as long as everybody is masked up during that close contact period, the North Dakota Department of Health is saying those students nor staff would have to quarantine. So we're in our first full week, or our second week of that, I should say. And the silver lining in that piece is attendance is going to be better, so not so many students would have to quarantine, not so many staff would have to quarantine as well. So far, so good with that. As far as a timeline of a survey going out to our students and families who are in a distance learning model, that survey went out today to see what their intentions are for a return either at trimester time for elementary or semester time for high school students, or middle and high school students. So that survey went out today, and it closes on Friday, and then we will take a look at that data and scrub it and see what kind of space we have, accommodations that we can make for perhaps a projected high percentage of students who will be returning. That's my guess, but my guess might be completely wrong given the COVID data are going in the wrong direction in our state and in our county. So that's what we have for you tonight. It's just a very thin overview, but we'd be happy to respond to any questions about any other aspects of our school reopening. This is week number 7, by the way, so maybe we don't call it school reopening anymore.
Questions or comments from board members? Jackie.
Oh, apparently I've just been on this whole time. So the mask difference and close contact relaxation by our North Dakota Health Department is not exactly in line with CDC recommendations. CDC recommendations have not changed when it comes to that. And so I have a little bit of concern in terms of, kind of pressures that we put on teachers, the stress that teachers have to have sometimes making decisions within their classrooms. And I do wonder if a mask mandate is something that we should lean towards. If everybody is mandated to be masked, then teachers don't have to worry about were people wearing masks, were they not wearing masks. It could almost be an assumptuous go-to as opposed to not. And I know that when these kinds of things relax and there's maybe a conflict between different sources on what should be done, people get confused and sometimes people relax their standards as a result of that. And so it's something that I wanted to bring up. One of my questions has to do with something completely different, but sort of the same. I know that, we've talked about special education, and this kind of complicates that a little bit because in order to fit the 2-mask situation, it can't include things like gaiters or face shields, those kinds of pieces. And so I know sometimes we have special education students who maybe need something a little different, and that can kind of conflict with the safety protocols that we have in place. And I was just curious if there is a decision-making tree or something that we can pass down to teachers when these sort of things conflict. I think about my role as a social worker, and sometimes we have ethics that conflict. And then we have a hierarchy decision tree to help us kind of figure out what should happen and who we should go to. And I just wonder if we have anything like that in place, or if we can develop something like that, maybe in cooperation with public health, just to take some of that pressure off of teachers, because I think we're all very stressed, even though we're getting a little bit used to the school year. And I hate for teachers to be making some of those decisions on their own.
Somebody like to respond to that?
I'll go ahead and take the first swing at that. We do have some extenuating circumstances where we might have speech pathologists who need to wear a shield rather than a mask. If we're dealing with articulation or a lateral S or something like that, then we have made concessions. We've made concessions where we have hard of hearing or deaf students who need to see the teacher's face or the interpreter's face. But as far as just providing options, we're fairly tight on that. We had a situation recently where somebody did have a mask on, but it was a specialist working with a small group of kids, and again, it had to do with being able to, see the pronunciation. It was at the primary level, pronunciation of words. So in that case, because a shield doesn't qualify as a mask, then that creates some additional stress right there. So Lindsay, Rude, and I are putting together a communication that will, again, drill down to the specificity of what masks are allowed, because we do actually have a picture board, if you want to call it that, of what masks are acceptable and what aren't. And we probably do need to do a little bit of a refresher. So those would be my comments. I'm not sure if Ms. Galatch or Mr. Thompson have anything to add to that.
Just as a follow-up question, has anybody talked to our colleagues 80 miles south of here as far as how their mask mandate is working or their exceptions to the rules? Because there are multiple exceptions to things, including not only the ones you've pointed out, but even just the kids with autism spectrum disorder or other things that physically can't do that because of the sensory issues. Have we checked with our other colleagues around the state how it's going or lessons learned from them?
They know that I'm the contact. I'm the conduit to the other superintendents. They, like us, have layers of it, and they've made exceptions where exceptions need to be made. And frankly, more of the questions are coming to us than us to them, and we'll take that as a compliment.
All right. Other questions or comments from board members? Jackie, did you have any follow-up that you want to? Any other questions or comments from school board members?
I have a couple.
Go ahead, Shannon.
So I one question related to each of the updates from Dr. Brenner. First one is related to, I guess, the rationale behind, well, not the rationale, but how are we advising teachers as it relates to their responsibility to be that standard of proof, whether students were wearing masks properly?
We're all looking at each other, Shannon. I'm looking at, and the room is so big, we're trying to make eye contact here. No, as far as, when the contact tracing begins, and Jackie could probably even speak to this as well, we provide seating maps, seating charts of classrooms, and there is a level of responsibility and accountability that's placed on teachers trying to recall if students were masked up at a certain time, a certain period of the day. So it can be a bit complicated on their end, but they're doing the best they can to respond to those questions when contact tracers are checking in with them. I'm not sure if that was completely your question. I'll try again if it wasn't.
No, yeah, so, I mean, more importantly, right, so this is kind of, this whole business with, now we're making an exception if it can be, quote, proven masks were worn. My concern is on, the standard of proof, one, and two, I guess I would expect that we would be advising teachers if they even have a hair of a doubt that people weren't wearing their masks or were, that they just need to answer, they don't know. I think natural tendency, and I've seen it happen when somebody asks a question, right? We try to come up with an answer instead of just saying, frankly, I don't know, and I can't recall. And so I think that's fundamentally very important when it comes to a health situation like this where, the way you get out of a quarantine is by verifying and proving that you are wearing a mask properly. And I would imagine oftentimes the teacher is part of that contact tracing to recall, was the student wearing a mask the entire time? So that's what I was wondering. Are we advising them that, you know, it's okay not to know if you're asked by contact tracers? You know, it's perfectly acceptable to say you're not sure.
I would say in the limited number of COVID cases that we've had with students and the contact tracers conversations with teachers, they're more than honest about that. If there's ever a doubt, we always err on the side of student safety. So again, in the limited cases that we've had, teachers are really good about tracking students and mask wearing, and if there are some exceptions, they pay close attention to those particular students. So I guess in the ones I've dealt with, and probably Catherine as well, that's never been an issue. I don't expect it would ever be an issue.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Also, Shannon, I think it would be helpful for people to know too that the contact tracers do have certain times of the student's day that also are kind of asked about specifically that might be higher risk for not mask wearing. So for example, were you sitting very close to somebody at lunchtime or on the bus? Are you part of a sports activity, choir? In PE, were you wearing a mask? Those kinds of questions are asked. Did you stop and talk to someone in the hall? So that way, that takes some of the pressure too off of classroom teachers because they don't have to account for all of those other areas of the student's day which might be higher risk.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, my second question, I appreciate that, Jackie. My second question is more towards the survey that came out today. And Jody, I'm not putting you on the spot because I know I asked a series of questions after it came out. But some of the things that, you know, I'd like to put out there, if there is a response at this time, you know, in the survey, it made it sound like if there was a significant number of families who elected to send their kids back into a face-to-face classroom, that potentially not only those students would have, you know, an upending of, hey, they're going into a new environment, potentially new schedule, new teacher, but that distance students could similarly be impacted by the choices of those families. And as a distance parent, I'm a little concerned about, well, I'd say I'm a little concerned that, I mean, it's one thing to change out a teacher. It's another thing to totally upend a schedule that we've worked for 6 weeks to get established. And so just, I'm interested in hearing kind of what the district is thinking about, you know, if this, then that, and how that might get worked out, or whether those parents who are distance parents that are impacted by those returning students, whether they can have an election at that point in time to say this just isn't working.
I would say we're going to try to limit the disruption to both our face-to-face learners, our distance learners, and those that are moving from distance learning back to face-to-face. Our goal would not be to disrupt any of the staffing, but we have over 600 elementary students that have chosen distance learning, and until we get the survey results on Friday, we won't know what the impact is going to be at each of the individual schools or within each of the distance learning classrooms. But Shannon makes a great point. In the survey and the letter that we sent out to our families, we're very clear at the elementary and secondary level that whatever choice you make now is the choice you have to stay with for the rest of the year. This is just so disruptive to think about doing it 2 more times at the elementary and 1 more time at the middle and high school. It's just too disruptive to our families and to the processes that, as Shannon pointed out, we've already worked really hard to establish. So we really will work hard to limit the disruptions to both sides of that issue, whether it's the distance learning kids or the face-to-face students.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Jody, and I certainly will follow up with you on our individual situation, but I just, as a parent of a distance learner, I thought it was a perspective that others probably share, that, you know, we committed up front to distance learning. We knew going into it that, hey, we'd get a teacher, there's going to be some flexibility, we're going to have to figure out how this works. And, you know, I'll point out it's taken 6 weeks to get to a point where, hey, we know what platforms we're using, all the curriculum is finally implemented. We've had about a week of being in what I hope is the routine. It hasn't switched up this week yet, so I think this is the routine. And I just would hate to see that start over again for my kid or another kid who's worked really hard to try to get to this point. So I just appreciate you hearing that out, and I'll certainly follow up.
Shannon, did you have any other questions or comments? Cynthia, do you have any questions or comments?
I had a question, and Jody Thompson answered it, but I will kind of follow up with that. So, not having seen the survey, from what I'm hearing from Jody Thompson, this is their choice, because that's what parents had been asking me. Once they decide this, then that's what for the rest of the school year, that's the model that they're going to stay with. So that must be clear on the survey. I think it would be helpful. I don't know if it's written somewhere else. I did take a glance at the COVID-19 page. And I couldn't really find that, but I didn't spend a lot of time looking. So we just need to get the word out, I think, because that's the question I've been getting. Is this it? I make this decision and then I stay there the year.
It's very clear in the survey and the cover letter that is the case, Cynthia.
Chris.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I'm sure you'll put it on the website at some point or someplace.
Thank you, Cynthia. Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Going back to the previous, Alicia, you're in the school, you're a student. Think of your day when you arrive at Red River and you come into the Commons and you go through your school day and then you go home. Are you seeing, I don't want to load the question, what are you seeing with students wearing masks? Does it vary from classroom to classroom, or is it fairly sustainable across the school day? What are you experiencing?
I think it's pretty sustainable throughout the school day. Obviously, there are some exceptions. Like I'm taking Spanish, and it's really hard when she has her mask on, so it's easier when she doesn't, so that we can see her lips moving, you know. Yeah, I think it's easier for that, but otherwise, it's pretty sustainable throughout the school day, besides lunch, but we're all 6 feet apart for that, too. So.
Thank you.
Catherine?
If I can just add to that, Mr. Douthit, I was at a meeting at Red River High School the other day, and when I walked out, school was well out of session, and there had been 5 different student groups just kind of hanging out. Every single kid was masked. I walked over to to my car. The coaches were masked. They were doing drills that were physically distanced. This morning I was driving to school. There were kids walking south together, masked. And so I think our students really, the messages resonate with them, and they're doing everything they can to make sure that they're maintaining the safety standards that we have in place. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Well, we heard the student perspective. Why don't we hear the teacher perspective? Melissa, do you have any comments?
Well, I'd say initially when the masking or the quarantine policy changed, I didn't get a lot of feedback immediately. But when you're just talking with people, the teachers weren't a big fan of the change that public health made. I think more so because, yeah, it's really tough when kids are out. It's been tough with the teachers are out, but I think at the same time, teachers and staff felt like, yes, all these people are out and it's a pain to try to find subs to cover, and it's tough to get work to students, but we're doing what's keeping everybody safe. So when you were saying about the stress, our kids hardly ever take their masks off during the day in majority of our classrooms, because I would say there's a good number of our classrooms where we can't get 6 feet apart, and so our kids just keep our masks on. And I would say even if you had a mask mandate, we would still have that, okay, how many times did the mask fall below the kid's nose today, and who took it off to get their drinks of water, and so we would have that regardless. I think the biggest thing with the new mandate is they're really hoping that the contact tracers, when they contact us, they truly do ask us. That was the teacher's big concern. If a kid is tested positive or as an adult and they're trying to figure out the close contacts, are they going to ask the teacher who was wearing their mask properly and who wasn't, rather than just assuming everyone had their mask on. It was more, are the teachers going to be asked, so we can say whether or not our students wear them properly for a good portion of the day. Because at the elementary level, the kids have them on, but are they always on properly 100% of the day? Yeah, probably not. They slip and fall, and we remind them to put them back on. As far as shields, there's a lot of teachers that when we're up front teaching, we have to have a shield on because our kids need to be able to see our mouths. And I think that's at any level, or even we've noticed like with our mics, you wear your mic, but the mask still kind of muffles it up. And so you have to have that shield on when you're teaching. When we're one-to-one right up to a student, we don't, but when we're up in front, many of us have found that it's easier to teach when we have the shield on so that our students can hear us and understand us, especially at the primary level, or like with a foreign language where then it's really important for the lips to be seen. But then too, that's up to the teacher. Some teachers do that and some teachers don't. So I think the teachers appreciate that it is up to them when they're in the front of their classroom how to best teach the students in their classroom.
Melissa, just a quick follow-up question. When you're teaching up there with a face mask on, a shield on, I mean, and not a mask, are you generally physically distanced so that you're farther than 6 feet away while you're up there doing the face shield?
I do my best to be that 6 feet away since I have the face shield on.
Thank you. Other questions, comments from school board members? Jackie?
Thank you for that. I actually wrote down, email Melissa, but now I don't have to. And, you know, I do think that for the most part, and it makes me feel better when I hear the feedback from teachers that they want us as contact tracers to be honest, because that's what we're hoping for too, is that everybody's just being very vulnerable and honest about those things. I was just wondering if, Dr. Brenner, maybe you could help so that people that are listening might feel at ease in terms of procedures. So just because somebody isn't considered a close contact and requiring quarantine doesn't mean that everybody that was in the room wouldn't be contacted correctly. And then also the second part of that is, do teachers then have the choice, if they have a positive case in their classroom, to self-quarantine and take that recommendation if they so choose to?
The second part of the question, if the teacher felt vulnerable in that moment or during that time, then yes, they have the option to quarantine. In the first part of your question?
It was just, let's say we have a positive case in the class, but everybody was wearing their masks, for example. Would they all those students' families still be contacted and told, you were in the room with the positive case, but right now we're just recommending self-monitor, or would they not be contacted at all?
We will contact them, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Good discussion. Let's move on to item D, fall enrollment report to Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Dr. Lund, members of the board. On page 37 is our fall enrollment information for this school year. There are 3 tables that are on that memorandum. If you think about table 1 as the last month of last school year to the first month of this school year, and we'll walk through these individually. Table 2 is basically fall to fall comparison, which is really what we most focus on at the district level. And then table 3 is RSP and their enrollment projections versus the actual. So if you look at the first table, the spring 2020 to fall 2020, you can see we break it out by the school levels. So elementary was down 71 students, middle school down 18, high school up 144, overall up 55 students. Not unusual, I don't think, when we compare those 2 categories, spring to fall. Table 2 is fall to fall. Again, this is where we spend most of our time at the district. This is where our funding is impacted in the fall to fall comparison. So you can see elementary took a substantial dip, down 101 students. Middle school is down 44, and high school is up 99. Overall, down 46 students. And RSP, the Table 3 comparison, you can see off a little bit at the elementary, off by 60, off by 38 at the middle school, off by 15 at the high school, overall off 113 students, but still 98.5% accuracy, which I know Rob is very proud of from RSP and Associates. Give you a couple of other impacts that probably affect those numbers. And as Rob and I have talked, I think the increase in homeschool students has been pretty impactful. We're up 84 students in homeschool compared to last year, and a majority of those are in the elementary. So elementary homeschool is up by 58 students, middle school is up by 9, and high school is up by 17. So again, 84 more students enrolled in homeschool this year probably accounts for Rob being off a little bit in his projections. Our largest elementary school is Discovery West with 532 students. South is our largest middle school with 587. Grand Forks Central has 1,148 students. So we made some changes to the boundary line a few years ago and have tried to control the in-district transfers back and forth between the high schools, and now Central actually has a small advantage compared to Red River in overall enrollment. Also a reminder that we have our early childhood special ed program. There are 69 students enrolled in ECSE. None of those numbers are reflected in any of those tables. We have programs at Discovery West, Kelly, Wilder, Lake Agassiz, Lewis and Clark, and Phoenix. And Dr. Lund, you usually asked about kindergarten, so I'll try to beat you to the punch. This year we had 598 kindergarten students enrolled. Last year, 626. So we're down 28 kindergarten students overall. Gladly answer any questions the board members may have, Mr. President.
Questions or comments for Jody? I have one, and it's more just for public, so the public understands. The reimbursement from the state for face-to-face learning versus distance learning, there is no difference in reimbursement from the state, whether they're learning at home or learning in the school, correct?
That's correct.
Other than homeschooling. If they're homeschooled, there's no state reimbursement for the district for a homeschooled child.
That's true. The only disclaimer I would have is not this year, but in previous years, if homeschool families wanted to take a course at the middle school or high school, we did get partial foundation aid payment depending on how many courses they took.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for Mr. Thompson? Shannon, Cynthia, any questions?
No, none for me, thanks.
Okay.
None for me either.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 7, Superintendent's recommendations for action. 7A is Shared Parks and Facilities Use Agreement for 2020-2021. Mr. Berge?
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 38 is my memorandum. I'll walk through that, and that explains the agreement fairly well, and certainly any questions, feel free to speak up. The shared use or shared parks and facilities use agreement proposal is attached to this memorandum. The term of the previous agreement ended June 30th of 2020. The attached proposed agreement would extend that out for 2 additional years. Net annual fees for locations on Exhibit A would increase from $5,200 to $200 each of the next 2 years. Net fees for locations on Exhibit B, mainly it would be the ice facilities, would increase $3,000 and $3,250 the next 2 years. And the Park District and the School District intend in next year in 2021 to look at physically splitting the electrical lines related to Cushman Field so that each entity has a more accurate charge for that usage. Any other changes within the proposed agreement are minor language adjustments and don't materially impact the intent or terms of the agreement. So administrative recommendation is to renew the Shared Parks and Facility Use Agreement with the Grand Forks Park District for the 2 years ended June 30th of 2022. And again, any questions, let me know and we can work through that.
Questions for Mr. Berge? or comments? Seeing and hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the recommendations? We have a motion by Chris. Do we have a second? Second by Doug. Any further questions or comments? The motion is to approve the lease as outlined. Hearing and seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item B under action, Superintendent's Evaluation Committee Report. Mr. Manley.
Thank you, Dr. Nunn. The Superintendent Evaluation Committee met on September 23rd to establish the evaluation criteria. Now, the evaluation format will be the same as last year, and a strategic plan will accompany the evaluation tool. Superintendent goals will accompany the evaluation tool. So superintendent will provide a narrative to board members. And board members are encouraged to visit with superintendent for clarification on unknown topics in response to a past request to add a NA option to the evaluation template for board members to use when they did not have sufficient information about the topic. That would not work because it would change the scoring mechanism to the negative. So a NA or a blank will not work for the evaluation. So if we all could make sure to if you're not sure on a topic, speak with Superintendent Brenner and get some information on that topic and be sure to fill everything in. Now we have an aggressive timeline for this process. September 23rd was the meeting. October 12th is today, the school board meeting, introduce, review, and approve the evaluation process. October 13th, email evaluation tool and supporting documents to board members, and you'll take care of that. October 23rd, we have to have the evaluations returned to Cindy for scoring purposes. October 28th, the committee meets again to develop the draft evaluation. November 3rd, school board packet for November 9th is distributed, and November 9th, we'll have a school board meeting under action for the superintendent's evaluation. Any questions?
Questions or comments for Jeff? So the recommendation is to approve the plan as outlined by Mr. Manley. Do we have a motion for that? Moved by Bill. Do we have a second? Second by Jeff. Any further questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Thank you. Let's move on to 7C, which is the consent agenda that was at your desk this evening. Do I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda? Got a motion by Doug and a second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Let's move on to item 8, which is other announcements. I've got 2 quick announcements. Amber is not with us tonight. I'm not sure why. She had her baby 7 days ago. I mean, gee. But Joseph Robert Allen Flynn was born on October 8th. A nice, healthy 8 pounds, 12 ounces. So congratulations to the Flynn family. And then my second announcement is, don't forget, we have a school board meeting next Wednesday, not this Wednesday, next Wednesday at 5 p.m. where, what's the new name of the company?
SiteLogic.
SiteLogic is going to be giving a presentation. So those are my 2 announcements. Dr. Brenner, you have any announcements?
Yes, I have a celebratory one. Grand Forks Central Knights High School boys tennis team, state champions as of last weekend, coached by Max Weiser, also a Grand Forks Central graduate and a former Wilder student when I was a principal there. So congratulations to them, and congratulations to the Red River Rough Riders boys high school tennis team, who was in the championship match with Central.
And I'm assuming he gave some of his credit to his former teacher at Wilder growing up.
I don't think that happened.
Jody, Catherine, Scott, do you have any announcements? Go ahead, Jody.
Just an update for the board on our flu immunization clinics. Those have wrapped up. We had 1,536 students that were given a flu shot, 528 staff members. Overall, just over 2,000 staff and students received flu immunizations. We're planning a second round for our distance learning folks. So thanks to Mr. Palmosino for allowing us to use Lincoln Park as our drive-through immunization clinic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any board members have any announcements? Seeing none, let's move on to B, board requests for future considerations. Do we have any future considerations from board members? Hearing none, let's move on to C, school board norms. Doug, how did we do?
I think we did very well tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Let's flood Amber's email box with congratulations over the next couple of days. Have a good evening.